All right, I'm here to talk about perhaps the most interesting topic we've ever talked about on a Lifeway Social Insider coaching video. Are you ready for it? The General Data Protection Regulation. Doesn't that sound incredibly fascinating? My name's Chris Martin. I help run this thing called Lifeway Social. And this week in our coaching video, I wanted to talk about the GDPR, as it's been called, or the General Data Protection Regulation in the European Union. Now, you may have seen a lot about this. I've gotten a lot of emails, relatively speaking, a handful of emails or texts or Twitter direct messages about asking about what the GDPR is and if it affects what we're doing online. And honestly, for the first couple of days I was getting questions over the last week or two, I had to say, I honestly don't know. I need to get back to you because it's a super complicated law that was passed in the European Union, which still includes the United Kingdom for a time, but not for long, I think, because of Brexit. But basically, this is a response to tech companies, specifically, like online social tech companies or just companies that collect data and information from us online in general. It's a law that's passed to help protect users and their data and empower users to be able to require companies to disclose information about the data they have, or to perhaps even get rid of data in general. Now, if you'll give me some grace, I'm going to have to be referring to some notes on this in an article that's actually linked in, if you're watching this in the Friday email, I think it's linked at the top in the headline from Slate, just kind of a basic explainer on the GDPR, or the General Data Protection Regulation. So what is it? Really, what it is, I wrote this down, it's a law requiring companies to do a number of things. One of which is that if there's been a data breach at an organization, they have to report that there has been a data breach within 72 hours. And allow people access to the private data that's been gathered of them to find out how it's being used. So that's a really important thing. Companies have not been required to do that ever before, which is kind of shocking to think about. But reading through the articles, 3 or 4 articles that I've read on this law now, makes me realize how complicated it is to legislate the internet after it's been around for so long. It's remarkable how it's just going to be super hard for a lot of companies who probably aren't even paying attention to GDPR right now. If you've been getting, like me, I tweeted a kind of a tongue-in-cheek tweet joke the other day. I said, please tell me more about your new privacy policies and terms of use. Maybe you're like me and you've been getting a ton of emails about this or other communications about companies changing their privacy policies or changing their terms of service or whatever. That's all because of GDPR. A friend of mine asked me, he was like, do all these companies just have the same law firm or something? Like, why are they all changing their privacy policies at the same time? It's because of this new law. So the other thing that the GDPR requires is that users have a right to be forgotten. That means that they have the ability, I'm quoting this from the Slate article, this allows users, you and me, to demand that companies remove certain personal information from the internet and the right to opt out of sensitive data collection. The GDPR further broadens the definition of personal data to include locations, browsing history, IP addresses, and other information. So one of the questions that I've gotten from a lot of you is, do I have, you're asking me, do I have to do something about this? This is an EU law. Most of you watching this are in the United States. Not all of you, but most of you watching this are in the United States, not in the European Union. So you may be tempted to say, oh, this is an EU thing, has nothing to do with me, I don't have to worry about it. And that was my first response the last week before this week. It's not necessarily true. You have to abide by the GDPR if you, your organization, company, church, are collecting data from people who are citizens of the EU. So if you are working at an organization and you're collecting the email addresses or other information of people from the EU, you have to probably take some action. Now, I know there are a few people on the Lifeway social email list who are probably watching this video who are part of the EU. I'm currently asking within like our Lifeway legal and other departments, hey, is there something I need to do, or am I in the clear? Now, my understanding is that if users opted in to give their information to an organization, the organization doesn't necessarily have to take any action. I could be wrong on that. But if they said, hey, I'm willingly giving my email address and first name to this company to join their email list, that company may not have to do anything because the people willingly gave them their information. But if a company, let's say you're shopping at on an online store, and just because you signed in with an email address, they're now emailing you, despite the fact that you didn't opt in for anything, maybe. You now have the ability to ask to be removed. You now have the legal ability to ask to be removed, like you haven't before. This is so complicated. I don't fully understand. But this is why you're getting all those annoying privacy policy emails. What I have for you, if you're watching this in the email, it's linked in that little part right above. If you're not watching into the email, you've just come across this on YouTube or something, I'll link it into the description of the YouTube video down below. But there's a handy website, gdprchecklist.io. It's super in-depth and helped me realize of the complexity of this whole situation. But it has an entire checklist. Looks to be free and not be asking for any of your information or anything. But it has like kind of a checklist of everything you should be going through. Now, some of this is super nitty gritty. Like I'm reading this and I'm like, I have no idea what I would do with some of this stuff. And it says, like make sure your technical security is up to date. Well, that's not a me thing. That's probably like an IT thing or whatever. But it might be helpful for you if you oversee an organization or you're collecting the data of a lot of people in the EU to go through this checklist and see what you need to do. There are also plenty of articles and things that I haven't linked anywhere that are helpful about processing through this and figuring out what to do. But that's just a little bit of an explainer. And you should know too that, right now this is an EU thing. So it's only if you're working with people who are in the EU or have collected information from people in the European Union. But this is there's a law like this that's being pitched around, a bill like this, a policy like this that's being pitched around in the United States Congress and other areas. And so something like this is almost certainly going to come to the United States. And I would support it. I don't know if it's a big government thing or a small government. I honestly have no idea. I'm just in favor of the government requiring companies to advocate for their users and basically protect users and their information. Because as we've seen with Facebook and some other organizations, Equifax, etc., some companies have been a little bit too cavalier and sloppy with their users' data. So anything we can do to keep them accountable and to help them handle our data better as consumers, as users of apps or whatever, I'm in favor of it. So I hope that explains the GDPR. What's that stand for again? The General Data Protection Regulation. That's a little bit on that. I hope it was helpful. Can't imagine it was super helpful because I'm still trying to figure it all out. But I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope this video was helpful.